All right, folks, we're back. We are in part 2 now of our list picker video. We just left off the end of last video talking about the screen one to initialize so that the proper question populates the moment we start the program. And like I said, we're going to hard code the value of the index to 1 just to be on the safe side so that when we start the program, nothing funky or buggy happens where it's not going to grab, even though it should, but it's not going to grab the appropriate value 1 and therefore might display a different question. So by starting the program off with a 1, we then can continue on when we click the next button so that we're incrementing to the appropriate question. Because that leaves us to the last part, which has to deal with the next button. And the next button is where we are going to be doing all the incrementing of the index. Because as of right now, everything with using global index is always pointing, because it's hard-coded to 1, it's always pointing to number 1. What we want to do now is that when we click the next button, we want to increment this value to 2, because when we increment to 2, it's now going to point to the second question, the second answer, or the second ordered list over here. Or when we click the next again, it should increment another 1 to 3, so it shows the third question, the third answer, or the ordered list number 3, and so on and so forth. All right, so that's what we need to do when we are using the next button. So for that, we're going to go under my button 1 here, and again, whenever we click the button, we want the event to fire off, so we're just going to use the standard button 1.click. All right, and so what we're going to do here, the very first thing what we're going to do here is we want to make sure that the index, we are increasing or incrementing the index. Because again, we're hard coding it initially to 1. We want to now make that count up to go to 2 to 3 to 4, etc. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my variables here, and I want to grab a set block. And let's plug that into my button. And let's just change the drop-down arrow to global index. And like I said, every time we click the plus button, the next button, we want to increment or add 1 to this index value. So I'm going to go into my math tab, grab my plus block, and plug that in. And then I'm going to mouse over global index and grab the get global index and plug that into this first input. And then I want to just duplicate this number 1 here and then plug this into this input right here. All right, so ultimately the global index is being set to the current value of global index plus 1. So the first time I click the next button, it'll get the value 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. Store the value 2 in here. That will now point to the second index in all 3 lists. I click the next button again. Well, the current value is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. All right, this now will then translate into pointing to the third value or third data set or whatever the case may be, and so on and so forth. The issue now becomes is, well, what happens when we get to number 4? We're at the 4th answer. We're at the 4th ordered list or whatever. What happens if we click the next button again? Well, it's going to go to 5. Well, there isn't a 5th option within any of these lists, so it won't be pointing to anything, and therefore the program is just not going to work anymore. It could potentially crash. It could potentially just show blank for everything. There's a lot of things that can happen when you're, building programs and you all of a sudden reach outside the scope of the parameters set forth. So what you want to do in this case, once you reach 4, you can go about 2 ways. You can end the program, say congrats, you got this score, and try again, and you're going to have to make them start the program over again. Or we can take this and we can loop it back so that it reaches the first place again. So it goes through the process all over again, asking the same questions. And for the sake of this program, that is what we will do. All right, so what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to build in a condition into this. So I'm going to go into my control, and the only thing I'm going to need for this one is just an if-then block. I'm not going to need an else block. So let me plug that into here. So the condition that I want to check is the current value of my global index, is it greater than however many options I have in my list here? And since I have 4 options in all my lists, is the current index value greater than 4? If it is greater than 4, then what I want to do is I want to set the value of global index back to 1 so that it always goes back to the beginning, or I want to just allow it to add on. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my math block, and I want to grab my equal statement here because the equals block also has my inequalities inside as well. And I want to click on this drop down, and I want to select the greater than value. So like I did with the previous ones, I want to get the current value of global index. So I'm just going to mouse over and control click on this to duplicate and plug that in. And I want to check to see is global index greater than or equal to however many items I have in here. And so I can put a number 4 here if I want. But remember, when we're coding, we're trying to stay away from constants as much as possible. And there's a way that I could dynamically do this rather than putting a constant in there. Because if all of a sudden you decided to maybe take a question away, or maybe even add 10 questions, you're then going to have to come in here and you're going to have to alter that number as well. And we don't want to do that because it's just makes more work for us, and we have to hunt it down and try to find where that problem is, because that will create a bug. So, but there is an option for us that we can use. If we click on the lists here, if the fifth one down, it gives us an option of length of list. So when I mouse over it, it tells us counts the number of items in a list. All right, and that's what we want. So let's click on this and let's plug it into this input here. So this, what we'll do, it will look at every list that I have and we'll count 1, 2, 3, 4. This list will have 1, 2, 3, 4. The question list above this one here had 4 as well. So it's automatically going to get the value for us, and all we're going to do is we're going to check to see is the current index value greater than what the current value of my list is. It's also asking for another input here. So I technically can choose any one of these lists. It doesn't matter. So let me just grab a get feature and let me plug it in here. And I can choose whatever, it doesn't matter. I'll just use global Q for my global question list. So it's going to look at my global question list and say, oh, how many inputs? What is the list value? Update value is 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to return a value of 4 here in my code, and I'm going to then check to see is the current global index greater than the value 4. If the global index is greater than the value 4, like I said, what I want to do, click on variables. Let's grab a set and let's plug a set in here. And then I want to set this to global index. And I want to set this value to 1. Hard code it to 1. And let me click on this and duplicate. So what that will do, that will then take my index value and force it back to the very first, the number 1, which will then now, based on the code that I wrote so far, point it to the very first input within my lists over here. And that's kind of what I want to have happen, because I do not want it to go past 4. Otherwise, the program would break. All right, so that will allow us to avoid, any sort of thing like that happening. The next thing that I need to do is I need to make sure that whenever I click the next button, that I'm populating the proper question within this first tab over here. All right, so with that being said, that is a label that I placed up there. So I want to go into my label 1. And I want to scroll down to where it says the set label 1.text. Let's click on that and let's connect this into this here. So I need to make sure that I'm displaying the proper question within this label here. And we pretty much already wrote that up here. It's basically the same code that we wrote up here. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to right click on one of these. It doesn't matter which one I do. And let's just put it down here. And again, the same thing. We need to just make sure that we're pointing to the appropriate list. Right now, this is the global choice list. I don't want to display the choice list within the label up top where the question should be. I need to display the question. So I want to go for this list, click on this drop down, and choose global Q for my global question. This will allow us to point to the proper list, which is up here. All right, the index will count, pointing to the proper placeholder or value that I need input, or index I should say, that I need to be at, and then it will place that question within this label at the very top of my screen there. All right, so with that being said, that pretty much should kind of sum up the program. So let's go and let's test this and see how it works. All right, so program is loaded. You switch over to my camera. All right, so as you can see here, question 1, what is the color of the sky? That works great. By clicking on my list picker, all right, my list pops up. giving us all the elements that I programmed in to that list. Again, the color of the sky is blue, so it's that third option. So I'm going to choose the third option, blue, and then it matches with the correct answer, so it tells me that I'm correct. If I did it again and chose the wrong answer, yellow, all right, it tells me it's wrong. So when I hit the next button, it should cycle to the next question. Okay, what animal barks? So I click on here, it gives me the options. I choose the correct answer, correct. The notifier is on a 5-second delay, so you got to wait 5 seconds, and then once you do, you can try something different, and then obviously tells you it's wrong. We could cycle to the third question, and then the fourth question. And because that I put the code in there so that once I hit the next button again, it should automatically loop back to question number 1. And bang, there you go. It goes back to question number 1. And again, just like before, all these options, they still work how they're supposed to. All right, so with that being said, that is the end of this program. You will not have, because you just had a quiz, I'm not going to give you any assignments this week, so you can have the week off. Maybe I might come back to this where you may need to make an enhancement to it. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, there's definitely enhancements that we can do for this. Adding databases into this, adding loops. Right now, like a good example, like over here, we just hard-coded a conditional statement to make it go back to 1. Well, we could create a loop within this button to make sure that it keeps cycling through if we want to. So there's a lot of ways or avenues we can kind of explore with making this better. Maybe even making a project like a to-do list or a shopping list, But I'll think of something, but I don't want to do it just right now. But where we're going with this is when we create this type of program, the next the next avenue, I should say, that we can explore is what happens now if I want to search specifically for an item within a list. What happens if I want to sort items, create a random, jumble of items in a list, but I want to sort them alphabetically or sort them, however you want to sort them. We can create programs based off that. So that'll be sort of kind of where we're going to be going next week, dealing with searching and sorting. And that kind of really gets into explaining how search engines like Bing or DuckDuckGo or Google, what programs were written behind the scenes, which indexes and sort of files away all these websites. So when you do a Google search or a Bing search or a DuckDuckGo search on something, bang, all the search results are right there for you. So that is, kind of like the next jump into what we'll be talking about. But aside from that, we will wrap up for today. So again, I hope everybody has an awesome weekend, and we will catch you next week in another video. All right, folks, take care. Have a great day.